we are celebrating the 150th year of Swami Vivekananda's birth, and nothing was more important to Swamiji than education. So in that spirit, we have an educator who passionately believes in what we sometimes in the federal government language we call no child left behind. I'm sure you've heard of it. So he sincerely believes in that. So much so that he founded a school. It's called the American Vivekananda Academy, AVA, in Hudson, New Hampshire. And that school primarily has Bhutanese/Nepali refugees who were relocated to New Hampshire. I mean, we have some kids, Bhutanese refugee kids, who have attended some of our summer programs. So it's a similar group of students who were relocated to New Hampshire. And of course, coming from Bhutan, their English skills were very poor. And so he took upon himself the challenge to teach them, not only teach them using a very innovative, unique model that he has developed. It's called the Super Accelerated Learning Theory. We all call it the SALT model. So he's the father of that SALT model. And the model basically says that the present system of education that our kids K through 12 go through, it's a very inefficient model, and so it uses only very limited potential of the student. So his model integrates both sides of the brain, and I'm sure he will talk to you at length about it. So this model is primarily based on the Vedic education system, which used to be in existence maybe thousands of years ago. So he has, of course, improvised it, he has adapted it, and he has also included elements of, let's say, the American system of education, the British system. So there are some good things that we can inculcate from all of these systems. So that's the system that he will talk about. I just want to share one story to demonstrate his passion. So when he founded this school, of course, transportation for the students became a big issue. How would they come to the school? As you all know, many of these students, their families have very irregular working hours. They do not have access to transportation. So what Panditji used to do, he stays in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, which is about 30 miles east of here. And his school is in Hudson, New Hampshire. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, Panditji would start from his home, go to a parking lot in New Hampshire after 2 hours of driving, and there in that parking lot was a bus. So he would get into the bus, he would go into each student's house, pick them up, bring them to school, and at the end of the day, the whole cycle would be reversed. So it just shows you how committed, passionate, and sincere he is. So without further ado, let us welcome Pandit Ramadheen Ramsamooj, and he will talk of the Vedic education model. Panditji.
Om Sri Saraswatyaye Namaha. Om Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. Om Sri Swami Vivekananda Namaha. Thank you very much. I may have a lot to say, and I hope that I will be able to convey it succinctly to all of you. We all look at the world in very unique perspectives. Many of us look at it from underneath. We lift our head up into the heavens, and we say, thank the Lord. Somewhere in us, it is wired that the Heavenly Father is up above. I hope those of you who are here probably will think otherwise. Because that Father, that Heavenly Father, is within you. We have to look from above into things that we would like to know. And we have to do so holistically. Not in part, but as a whole. Because if you can get the whole picture, then you can know what the parts you should be doing. If we look at education today, and this is just something that I have put together to give you a background, there's chaos in public and private schools. I have made a statement many years ago, and that statement was that we send our children to school to be uneducated. If we leave them alone in their natural environment with their families and so forth, you'll find that they'll do a lot better than when we send them to school. Because many times they're not learning what they're supposed to learn in school, they learn everything outside of school. In the early 90s, I was a consultant to the Boston Public School. I had a friend, his name was Dr. Larry Myatt. He wanted to break away from this big school models, because in Boston, it was very easy to have a school with 3,000 students. And he took a group of kids and made what was called the Fenway Middle College High School, a small school. And he hired me as a consultant. And what I have noticed is that when you go to these schools, half the class time, the teacher is trying to calm the students down. So the good students, they sit waiting for instruction, and just 4 or 5 students in the class, this teacher have to spend time to calm them down. And by the time they are calmed down, then the rest of the class become agitated. In the end, they got only 10 or 15 minutes of instruction. That to me is very inefficient. Now, I also looked at, we are educating children for what? What is the purpose of this education? What is the purpose of this great education? Is to make our children citizens in a functional society. And one of the important factors in a society, a functional society, is that when you educate them, they should be able to find a job. First thing. Then afterwards they can find a passion and what they want to do. So there has been a divergence in schooling with regards to employment. There's a big separation. Many people graduate from college and they can't find a job. They still end up working at McDonald's. And then I also noticed that, listen, all these schools, colleges, including UMass, Dartmouth, they got some remedial programs. It means that the kids that are coming into the college and university are not up to the standard of what they expect. And so they have all these remedial programs. And in every school and in every institution, you find there is always remedial programs. Another thing that I looked at is that there are 12 million jobs, Americans, 1.2 million jobs Americans are unqualified for. We have work. But our students and children are not academically qualified to do those jobs. And they're in the STEM, science and technology and very innovative areas. So if we have the job and we have the institution, why is the mismatch? Why aren't we training our children to find those jobs? And finally, we see that the education that we have is so compartmentalized. You go and do an AP chemistry class. You go and do an AP physics. That's for the good students. You go and do English language, English literature. You got about 30 different subjects they got to do before they can complete their graduation. Why can't we bring all these subjects in a holistic manner? So that's the crisis that we have seen. That what is happening out there is not really working. And so we decided to set up an experiment. How could we change this? And that was my approach. First, we look at the 3 models of education internationally, and we see that there is one, which is the American system. We see the British system, and of course, we have the age-old long Indian Vedic system. What I have found in the British system, they have depth of content. You do little, but do it deeply. And so they use that for promotion. In the American system, what I have found, there's multiplicity of experiences. They expose the kid to a lot of things. You don't have to do too much. Just do it. And I said the American system served this country best when it started. Because in nowhere, in no other country, you can find two farmer boys in Iowa building a machine that is able to fly. They have fun. Then we looked at different educational best practices. What works? What don't work? And then I decided to, with my knowledge of neuroscience and other things of learning, we came up with this theory that there must be a way for us to learn, and that's what I will be talking about. And then, of course, we had this noble guy from Harvard called Dr. Howard Gardner, who came up with the multiple intelligence theory. Okay? And I think I did have a confrontation with him, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So, if there is a multiple intelligence, then we should address all of those intelligence in our learning process. Not only say that basketball players can be great, very intelligent, and they have no skill in communication and behavior, interpersonal or intrapersonal experiences. So, I don't think I should be reading this. Many of our schools, both public and private, are not bringing out the best in our children, physically, morally, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. So I have identified 5 areas, and I call it SIP me. SIP me. S is for spiritual, I is for intellectual, P is for physical, M is for mental, E is for emotional. You have to address all those areas in the learning process. We strongly believe that every child is potentially gifted. Now that's a different premise than most people start. They think that all children are dumb, and it's what we say to them, they're supposed to regurgitate it back to us. No. All children, every child is potentially gifted. Each child has unique gift. Given the appropriate learning opportunities and environment, every child can develop that unlimited potential and realize those unique gifts. The American Vivekananda Academy symbolizes the recognition of the fusion of the best from the East and West, having our children inquire, experiment, innovate, and be exposed to a wide spectrum of knowledge so that they can make informed decisions and prepare themselves to meet the challenges of the 21st century as global citizens. We no longer can think about individuals. You know, we belong to one particular group or one nation. We have to start thinking globally. And this is one of the reasons why we as a nation are way behind. AV has its roots in the great purpose of the liberal education, or tradition in education of both the East and West, to develop critical autonomy in the midst of healthy respect for others and traditions, to encourage rigorous intellectual standards, to lay a solid foundation for knowledge in mathematics and the sciences, the arts and the humanities, languages and literature, to develop creativity, discipline, character, and individuality, and to build civic virtue, public purpose, and the capacity and responsibility for freedom in each individual. That's a lot to be talked about. Now, the learning process has a lot to do with the way that your brain is wired. And you have to wire the brain in a particular way. Now, most of our educational model, the Western educational model, caters for what we call left hemisphere learning. They want it logical, they want it sequential, you understand me? In that process, you have a procedure to follow. If you don't follow that procedure, we're going to victimize you. However, another system is used in the arts. No, they want you to be creative. So draw something, you know, prepare a little music, do something different. So the right hemisphere of the brain deals with creativity and so forth. But it is how the brain is wired is responsible for how information is acquired, how it is assimilated, and how it is interpreted. And you all know, if I show you something in my hand and I ask you to describe this, every one of you have a different perspective on what is in my hand. And a good example is that there was an elephant, a big elephant, and 4 people asked, the blind man says, well, he held on to the feet and says, well, this is the trunk of a tree. Another one held on to the ears and said, that's a big fan. Another one held on to the trunk and said, oh, that's a big hose. And one held on to the tail and says, that looked like a broom. In other words, they had so much different, but none of them actually said that it was an elephant, because they were only looking from their own experience to the parts that was there. And this is exactly what is happening to all of us in the learning process. None of us see anything the same way. So then I want to know, what is it goes on behind the scene, that even though our input is the same, how come the output is different? What is there in the processing in our brain that allows us to make that difference? So the wiring of the brain is very important. Then next come to the function of the brain, because nowadays we have so much neuroscience that is being developed that we now can actually map the different parts of the brain. So you see that the left side deals with speech, reading, calculation, ratio, logic, fine concentration, science, step for step, which is linear processing, and feel for time and things like that. The right hemisphere deals with body language, intuitive feeling, creative, spontaneous, curiosity, play, risk, synthetic perspective, art, dance, music, interrelation, feel for space. And we had taken this a little further. We said these men are so dumb that they have to have 2 billion extra neurons in their brain. They could never do anything right. You understand me? Whereas the woman has got 2 billion less neurons in the brain, and they can do so many things, multitask at the same time. They are so creative. So there must be something that we have not been doing, or we have not been looking at, and naturally we are seeing a difference. But that difference should not be. And so we had a whole research being done. Why is it the girls can't do well in technology and science, and why is it the boys can't do well in baking and childcare taking and all those things? Roles. What make us so different? Why are we so? And it is because of the way that our brain has been, configured. Then I looked into, this chemistry business. Everything that happens within any system has got a lot to do with chemistry. Your brain function with chemistry. Everything is chemistry. The mere fact you have a DNA molecule, and this is what I always keep telling people, a DNA is a chemical. It's a chemical, but it has the ability to duplicate itself. And because of that ability, it has become part of the biological systems for reproduction. But what made that chemical that way? So in everything there is chemistry. And therefore, we looked at the chemistry of the brain. Now, how many of you have children and you tell them a lovely story and they will sit in amazement? And you see their eyes glow, and you see their curiosities, and they always want to know what happens next. Storytelling is a very important part of the learning process. Do teachers, when they go to school, tell the kids a story about their quadratic equations? Do they? No. So what happens if we bring the story to the quadratic equations? What happens if we bring a story to calculus? What happens if we bring a story to numbers and tweak their curiosity? Said, listen, we are living on Earth and we got 10 fingers, so maybe that's why we're using the denary number system. What happens if you go to another planet and they got only 2 fingers? Don't you think they should use another number system? Maybe the binary. So in this way you have to tweak their curiosity. And we have known what hormones do to the learning process. All you got to do is to go to high school. And when you see those hormones raging in those kids, then you want to know, when do they get time to learn? Food and drug. Don't you think that the diet and the food that you eat contributes to your learning process? You know, if you eat a heavy meal of starch, what happens to you in the afternoon? If you eat that for lunch, you're sleeping. Right? You think you can concentrate in a class after lunch? Actually, in conferences, most people do not want to speak after lunch because everybody is going to sleep on them. I think this is one of the techniques you guys use in the Vedanta or other conferences. They put Panditji after lunch. What about music? Did you listen to that chant? How calming and peaceful. It prepares you to receive information. And there is a direct correlation between music and mathematics. There's so much research. And I don't want to talk too much about all these things, but what I want to do is let you know that through poetry, you can memorize things. Through mnemonics, brain development, early... Dr. Singh sent me an email the other day. He said, Panditji, you got to look at this thing. What is it? You said you mentioned sometime in this salt area about prenatal education. Now New York Times is writing about learning in the womb. Learning in the womb. Remember that. The most important period in a child's life is during conception and birth. Most important. The most important, and that's the time we pay least importance. Because that's when the kid brain is, the neurons are being assimilated. It's being assimilated. So if you are peaceful, calm, you listen to good music, you will see you have a happy, jolly child, no matter what. And if you're constantly fighting and you're constantly invoking what we call negative emotions, your child is always going to be scary. So brain development and early childhood education plays an important part in the way that the brain of the child is being cultivated. And that's very important. So this is some students in my school. Part of the program, part of what I do, I prepare the students to learn. Very important. The students must be prepared to learn. And you can do that several ways. You can give them a motivating thought. You can give, and get them involved in some rituals, things that they like to do, that is ritualistic. Those rituals are very important because it also have a place, it configures the brain in a, actually there was a research done with Diksha, initiation. In the process of being initiated, the brain changes in a very unique way that makes that person, that disciple, ready to receive the knowledge from the teacher. So we have the classroom. My classroom is like a free-for-all. Students can ask me any question, and when I teach, I can, sometimes the kids ask me and say, "Sir, what subject are we doing now?" Because we have a maths period, and in the maths period I'm doing something on social science, something on geography, and I'm connecting all the information in such a way that they themselves do not know what is it they're learning. That compartmentalization, we removed it. Now, one important part of my school is family life and values. And that happens to be the best subject in my school. Because now the kids are learning what is the function of the family, what is this institution, why it should be revered in the way it should be, and what value system that they should be developing and knowing. All the maths and the chemistry is not important. Is what is the purpose of your life? You have to set them right. You have to set, if the train got on a line and the line knows, the destination, once the train begins, it will get there. So you have to put the kids with a sense of purpose. And if they do not have a sense of purpose, then you have them cultivate a sense of purpose. And in the family life and values, one of the things I ask the children to do is that I want you to say, when you graduate from here, tell me the kind of family you'd like to have. Tell me the kind of guy or the girl you would like to get married to. Tell me what kind of principles you would like this family to be based on. In other words, I have them think about it before they get into it. And of course, they have satsang and they have, we have physics. Everything must be in action. Physics in action. We do the potential and kinetic energy. I got them a little gobin and a little rubber band and let them make a little toy and then have them race it. You see, that's what all of them is there doing, racing their little gobin and then having joy and fun to see who's working, who's not working, what is happening. And then, as I said, the next thing is intelligence. Do we know what intelligence is? And then we had this guy called Howard Gardner, Dr. Howard Gardner, respectfully. And he said, intelligence should be multiple. Okay? And when you look at some of our background, from the Vedic background, you will see that intelligence is intelligence. It doesn't have to be compartmentalized. And as a result, it could be singular. And I got my own theory on this, and someday I will write about it. But I just want you to look at one extreme way to singular to the other extremes when it is multiple, and where do we find ourselves in that. But however, what we have recognized is that what Howard Gardner was talking about intelligence is really different processing and functions of the brain in different parts of the brain. So we can now map brain function with the intelligence that he has described. These are what Howard Gardner theory states. He has got 7 intelligences. Now I do not know, there's debate for how many more could be added. So I give a mnemonic, and this is another thing that we do in our school. In order for you to remember things, we give you a mnemonic. So I said here we got skill me. S is for spatial and space orientation, K is for kinesthetic, I is for interpersonal, L is for language, L is for logics and mathematics, M is for music, and I is for intrapersonal. Those are Howard Gardner's. So I said, okay, doctor, if we are accepting your theory, that will be nice, but I would like you to add on 2 more. And these are the 2 other intelligences that I would like to be added on. One is self-restraint. Doesn't that take real intelligence? To have control is what your intelligence should be. So self-restraint is one, and the next one is spiritual affinity. There's an intelligence for you to be seeking out to the consciousness of the world and the consciousness of yourself, the spirit. And here spiritual does not mean religious. It's a very different term. Religiosity, religious people may be spiritual, but all spiritual people are religious. So I talked about these 2, and therefore I give the mnemonic skill miss. The theory of salt, this is where we decided to, the left and right brain, they deal with parallel and process, linear and parallel processing. And those of you who have been in computer science, you would know that linear processing is very slow in computers. And if you're using parallel processing, that is considerably faster. Actually, it is about 300,000 times faster than linear processing. So if you could get your brain to be processing information through your right hemisphere, then the process is going to be faster. And worse, if you've now been able to stack it and map it in different positions in your brain, then your whole brain could be used as a very unique, what we call storage system. And retrieval of that system can be easy. So this is a mouthful of what the theory is. The super accelerated learning theory, SALT, states that the acquisition, assimilation, and processing of information of various disciplines holistically are through all organs of actions and perceptions in the information superhighway with the use of the whole brain and a disciplined mind in a semi or altered state of consciousness. It is based on the psychological development and physiological function of the biological brain through various neurological pathways in respect to learning, application, storage, and retrieving of information in and from its long-term static memory instantaneously. A mouthful. But I could not have done a better job than, because if I want to say it anywhere else, it will be a whole page. And this is what I want to share here. If you look, and they say this is not going to work on the, you would see that you have the brain, the normal state, sound, taste, eyes, visual, hands, tactile, etc. And you will see that there are pathways. There's a direct pathway up, and you see I got a loop called the mind, I got another loop called the consciousness, and I leave out in the space the memory. Okay? So information, normally when we give some information, that information, you know, in an indisciplined mind, not too conscious about things, it goes through the left hemisphere of the brain, and it goes, you know, straight up to the memory, and that memory generally is fluid, it is changeable. And this is one of the reasons why if somebody asks you, what did you eat yesterday, you have some confusion whether it was yesterday you eat the same thing or the day before yesterday. You have a little shift in time, and therefore your memory fails you most times. Some people got sharp memories. Let's not doubt that. But those who have the sharp memory is because they are engaged in what they were doing at the moment, and therefore they can remember it. But what happens to those who are not engaged? So then I came across the work of another educator. His name was Georgy Lazanov, and he called his theory what's Suggestopedia, in which he talked about, you know, accelerated learning. And what he did was he just shift a little from that which is normal to more being conscious learning, and therefore he have found great, you know, strides on his work, and now he is a well-renowned guy. But then I came up, I said, if Georgy Lazanov could have studied in India 12 years to look and see how the gurus, in fact, disseminate the information to the disciples, and the end of the pravachan, there's no test for them to take, and still they learn, and how do they assess their students, how well they learn, you understand me? And we have a typical example that stands before you in the form of Swami Vivekananda. You know, how many tests did he take? But you know, when he came to Harvard and he wanted to go to Chicago, one of the professors there, I think is white, said, here is a man, he is like the sun. He has so much knowledge that it will take the whole Harvard University professors to even equate one part of him. He didn't write any PhD. What I'm saying, education, knowledge, is something different from having a piece of paper and compartment, like, you know, putting it in compartments. So I said, well, listen, what happened if we can take this information and put it through our whole brain in an altered state of consciousness, through a disciplined mind, yoga, through a conscious awareness in which there's connectivity, wholeness, what we call universal consciousness, and sustainable, and it is part of a continuous system. Because most of the things that we do does not belong to continuous systems. Anything that is self-sustaining has to be perpetual, has to be sustained, continuous. And if we can do that, now what we can find is that that information is encrypted in your static long-term memory. And once it stays there for a certain period of time, it then becomes encrypted in your DNA. And that DNA is now connected to the universal consciousness of the cosmos. That's what makes you unique. Even though you're not aware of it, you can be able to transmit those characteristics. And this is why you can change who you are through several generations. So if you have got a characteristic that is not, acceptable to you, and you want to change it, then you change it in yourself, and then you inculcate it in your children, and then your children inculcate it in their children, and after 3 generations it becomes part of their gene. And what I am saying here, this educational model allows us to take what is around us and connect it to the cosmos. And it is not a one-way street. It is information from the cosmos. We can now connect it to ourselves. And isn't that what happens to our swamis and yogis? When they sit in meditation, they get all this information and they want to know where it is coming from. So what I am saying is that no doubt this is an idea, a Vedic idea, but where does it fit in the learning educational model of today? And this is the model that I have. And that pathway is what we call the super accelerated learning pathway, based on the theory. Now these are different parts of the, I try to break it up in pieces, but there's something called the superhighway, information superhighway, which I want you to think about. You see, if your consciousness is a particular level, the information flows tremendously. And the analogy that I gave is that we have the monarch butterflies. Oh, there you find them all the way in North Canada, but a particular time of the year you find them in Mexico. How do they move through 3,000 or 4,000 miles? Well, it is said that they go up and get themselves on the jet stream, and on that stream the jet goes down to Mexico. How did they know that? That if you go up that high, you will be able to move on a jet stream to take you where you need to go. Well, a similar thing happens in information. And once you can get there, you can know anything in this universe without having to go to school. And that's a terrible statement to take. Because all these young kids from AVA who are here, they will say, well, I don't need to go to school anymore. I will sit and try to get there. And probably get involved in the yogi flying competition so that they can fly up there. So the next, what we looked at is levels of knowing. Most of the levels of knowing that we have found is that there are only 6 levels of knowing. I said, oh, let's add another one. And the 7th one is internalization, the internalization level, where the information you have to internalize it. All the other theories say that the communication level, if you can communicate it, then you know it. And the example that I gave, and you should keep me on time. The example that I gave is that I have met people who give me all the reasons why they should not be smoking. You know? Why they should not be drinking. They give me all the reasons. They're more brilliant than me in terms of why they should not be doing it. But they have not been able to stop drinking or stop smoking. Why? Because they have not internalized that information. And the day they have internalized that information, they will know from within, this is not what I should be doing, and therefore I will quit, and I quit cold turkey. And do not have any repercussions thereafter. You have to internalize that. And you attend meditation class here, you'll see that's the thing that they want you to do. Every time you meditate, go inwards. Go inwards. Search your soul. What are the discrepancies that are there? Release the negatives. Release it. Let it go. And imbibe that which is beautiful. You do it every day. And that's what will remind you of what your purpose should be. Now, the elements of the Vedic model, this is what it is. It is teacher facilitation. It was designed to create independent thinkers. You had to have a discipline of body and mind. You must have a sense of purpose. You must have a universal perspective. You must have global connectivity. You got to have intuitive learning. You got to have memory and recall. And of course, there must be practical application. That's what I have seen in the Vedic model. If it has no practical application, it comes like the businessman who goes to listen to the Swami, and he goes and sit in front, and the Swami every time he gives his lecture, he says you should be honest in life, and you should be honest in your business and all those things, and then he sits there front seat. And when the Swami finished giving his lecture, he takes his little mat and he shakes it off, and he walks back into his dukan, in his shop, and he still put the stone in the rice, and he still... Okay? So one day, one of the students came to him and says, but, my dear, didn't you listen to what the Swami said? He said, you got to be honest. He said, have you seen what I do every time I go to the lecture? He said, that is good for the ashram. That is not good for the business. So it must have practical application. So what is happening in the ashram should also happen in the business place. And this is what the components that we got from the Vedic model. Mantras, sound, very important to tune the mind, to get the neurons in a manner that allows for what we call continuous information flow. Mental conditioning, that's what we get from yoga. You got to mentally condition yourself. Your mind and body. It's not that your body is going one way and your mind is going another way. A nice example of that is just tell yourself that today I am going to fast. All right, just tell yourself that. Today, Thursday, I am going to fast. And see what happens. Your mother-in-law brings nice laddu. You understand me? You do not know where all the nice food is coming from. But this is the day you have decided to fast. Everything good is coming. Why it could not have done? Why this never happened yesterday? Or why can't they bring it tomorrow? Why today? And if you are not well grounded or well focused, you'd say, okay, tomorrow I'll fast. I will take whatever comes today. So it is important to be mental, you have this mental conditioning. Postures, asanas, important. Relaxation and meditation. You have to de-stress yourself. You cannot stress the body out, because in a stressful situation, you cannot learn. Actually, there's some research done on that. You must have active memory and recall. That is, in the class, you got to constantly give questions and answer. You understand me? Constantly. So that there's an interaction in the class constantly. In my school, I have a rabbit and a monkey. And I will throw the rabbit and the monkey wherever. So everyone in the class knows that I am going to, in the spur of the moment, I'm going to ask them a question. If I throw the monkey, I'm going to ask them the question. If I throw the rabbit, they have to ask me a question. And if I throw the rabbit to a student, I can have the student ask the question to the guy who got the monkey. Then have the monkey guy ask the question who has the rabbit. In other words, there is interaction in the classroom, and you can stimulate that in so many different ways. Then, sutras, yoga sutras, mnemonics. Small mnemonics reveals a tremendous amount of information. And that's important in the learning process. Because some of you will notice that if you're reading a book, you just highlight certain things. That's all what you want to know. You don't want to remember the book. So in the Vedic model, sutras were very important. Mnemonics, everything in yoga sutras and, so many different kinds of sutras that are there. They take the information, put them into a small capsule pill, and have you swallow it, and then you got all this revelation. And this is what I don't think most teachers or educators have looked at, that is learning in an altered state of consciousness. That is, you got to listen. You can meditate and get yourself in that altered state of consciousness. You can listen to sobering music, music that allows you to get in that state. And in that state, information flow is tremendous.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Thank you. So yoga leads to relaxation. Now, we have to understand how memory works. Memory is based on the intensity of experience. If you have an intense experience, you will never forget that. And it is encrypted in your brain in such a degree that it's difficult to remove it. This is why we have so much psychosomatic diseases, because people have got so much bad memory encrypted that they can't forget it. But we have to recognize that the intensity of this experience allows you to have, a strong memory. If experience is dramatized and intensified, then it stays in the long-term memory and concept, emotion, and feeling. Today, another person sent me a website. He said, Pandit, you got to look at this. This is part of your salt. And they're talking about, emotions, how you are addressing the emotions of students and how that is improving their academic skills. So intensity, drama, plays, important. Nowadays, we don't take any consideration for music and drama. If the budget is cutting, those are the first thing that gets cut out. And this is the school model. First, we prepare the student for learning. We design the classroom very differently. We design the curriculum very differently. And the role of the teacher is very important. And the presentation of the subject information is different. And of course, assessment is different. How do we assess these students? As I say, the gurus give their pravachans, they go home, they have such an intense discussion on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. You understand me? When you want to know how learning takes place, you'll see the students within the class debating on each other. I think this is what he said. I think that is what he said. And because of the intensity of the discussion, learning has been taking place. The guru never gave a discussion or a test at the end. And worse, he never gives a multiple choice question at the end of the test to figure out how much you know. And then we have assessment. How do we assess this? But most important, this is a concept that I have been now introducing into classrooms and other places, a thing called constructive distractions. Constructive distraction. We are all going to be distracted in a classroom, 15 minutes maximum our attention span. So we should have in our classroom distractions that are within the context of what we are teaching, and it is constructive. And you can use videos, you can do so many things that you can do that. Now, the American Vivekananda Academy is based on competencies of learning and not time or years of learning. This is why I got two of my nephews here who have been part of my school. One is Devaj and Neeraj. One is 12 years old and one is 13 years old. And this summer they completed their high school. Completed high school. Now, some people say, well, how that can happen? Well, it can only happen through my school system. You cannot happen in any other school system. And so it starts from kindergarten, 2 years. Each level takes about 2 years for completion. Kindergarten, then level 1, primary school, level 2, middle school, level 3, junior high school, level 4, senior high school. Now we just put those names so that some people can see, compare standards, or where would they be and what, because in New Hampshire, for us to have this level 4 high school approval, the State Department wanted to know what is your exit grade. Because if the kids are leaving your school, they did not complete the whole school, then if they have to go to another school, where will they be placed? and we had to give and then it continues after level 4, level 5, which is a junior college, level 6, which is a college, and level 7, and that's what the Dean, Hogan, said that we should add in level 7 because he thinks that that will be a great idea to have a kid at the age of 19 coming out of school to be graduating with a master's degree. So that's a simple classroom of mine. This is my school in Hudson, and this is what it involves. We have to find the background of the students. We have to know where they are at, and therefore we have to address them. We have an MOU with UMass to promote and develop this theory and school system. We're trying to meet the needs of the community, collection of data, etc. So what I want you to do, I want to share something here with you, and this is not working anymore. So I just took some data from the 2 years in the school, and we tried to put them together. And this data is only restricted to the English language because the proficiency of these children were between kindergarten and grade 1. And I had to take them in 2 years to get them to graduate from high school. Now, if you look here, this was the composition of the class. They both were Nepalis and Americans, and there were some students. Despite this, the majority entered the AVA with poor fluid communication and conversation, writing, spelling, and grammar. And the majority of students were not allowed to speak or share English knowledge at home. In other words, at home, no English. This was, assessment of 220 grammar questions, and that's how they... Now, this is the grammar result. You notice you have the blue dots, and you have the purple dots. You notice at the beginning in 2011 when the school started on the 6th of September, and at the end of the first term, that's where the blue dots were. And at the end of the graduating year, that's where the purple dots were. Okay? Next was the growth. We noticed that some kids grew 113%. Okay, and the most important fact that I want you to see here, because I think I have about 3 more minutes. Now that was the grammar shift, what happens in the 2 years. This was the decoding results, and you can see how much it has. That's their reading skills. This is their writing skills. You see how big from the middle where they were to where they now are. This is the student growth rate, and we use a different test. And you would see that some students, you see the numbers that you see there? 2, 7, 10, 9, etc. Those are how many grades they grew in 2 years. So we had some student grew 10 grades in 2 years. Some grew 7 grades in 2 years. And when we looked at this data, I don't think there's any educator who have been able to, if they get 1 grade greater or 2 grades greater, or they are great teachers. These are the languages, the subjects that they had to do. And they were not easy subjects. So the content was in depth, and it was also very broad, and the curriculum, and as a result, they learned more in those 2 years than was normal. And of course, Sanskrit and yoga and Ayurveda music was important, because the Sanskrit is the only whole brain language known to man. And I use it as a language that allows the children's brain to develop in a holistic manner. It has nothing to do what is encrypted in the Vedas or any other thing. It is solely a tool for the brain to develop in a particular way. These are uniqueness of the program, and there's almost 100 uniqueness. So I just want you to know that. There are several issues that is in public school today that we are actually addressing by this model. So one of it is students leave school with a sound moral and ethical values, and to provide interaction between all generations, reducing, if not totally eliminating, the generation gap. And those are things that is so much prevalent in our society nowadays. It makes students into global citizens, provide opportunity to cultivate responsible citizens. Small schools, easily manageable. The student-to-teacher ratio is 10:1, inexpensive college education. Because this school does not cost us too much money for the students to come. A healthier bond, a healthy, closer bond between students and teacher. All the intelligence of the child is nurtured. Expose students to the super accelerated learning model, and block scheduling for better class management. Now, our students were able to participate in several conferences. Sukalia knows, have met them. They participated in Waves Conference, they participated in Vedanta Conference, and they made presentations. And actually their presentations were able to bring tears to those who were in the audience, to all the different professors, and when they listened to them. In other words, the children were able to develop communication skill that was so effective that their stories were told and it touched the hearts of those who listened. So they were invited to a conference at the White House. This was the students there, and actually they did the invocation in the conference. And this was the Waves Conference in 2012. This was the youth camp that we organize now. We're trying to get more and more students to participate in knowing more about this theory, inspiring them to learn in a holistic way. And through the University of Massachusetts and the 3R Foundation, we have been having this Trindical youth camp every year. What are some of the social implications? And I think I got only 2 more slides. Interesting enough is that the students who are ADHD, they are attention hyperactive disorder. They can't sit. Once they go through this program, after a while, they're able to be normal kids. And we think that their brain has been rewired in a manner that allowed them to be still. The way they think changes, because now they're able to think holistically. And most of the negative emotions disappear. And it is something that I want to study more, is that what is really happening to these kids, listen, there were kids who had so much conflict with their parents. The parents held me and started crying. They said they do not know what we have done, what we have as a school done to their kids, that they are now so loving, they are so understanding, they are so kind, now they are becoming productive, they want to help more rather than to become all this pain in the tail. So mental problem corrections, which I think is very important, because if there is something that is changing the way that the brain is functioning and rewiring itself, then that has got a huge social implication. It corrects gender biasness in education. Because since it's a whole brain learning model, the girls fit in perfectly in it. And the guys, we make them, their right brain becomes more active, and therefore they fit in now perfectly in it. So what happens now is there's no disparity in gender. And it allows for psychological and physical development to be in phase. Now, I can take a long time with being in phase. You know about midlife crisis? You know about menopause? You know about old age? Confusion? What happens? We all grow in phases. And that's what is the Varna ashram system is all about. And what this model allows you to do is to live within those phases. So by the time you're 25, a kid would have completed a PhD, got their profession, and therefore they now is ready to start a new life. And it accelerates learning, and students are 3 to 5 years ahead of the peers. Some of the cons: teachers should be efficient, presentation of content should be true and accurate, because if you take wrong information and put it in long-term memory, you're going to mess that child up because it will take a long time to get it out. Consequences: learning faster, less years in school. Education requires less vigorous retraining. There's some research that has done that a student today in high school will have to change a profession at least 5 to 7 times in their lifetime if they want to remain employable. So with this wide and broad curriculum, it is easy for them to make that change. And productive personally in life, hence life according to the biological system, which might not have social consequences. Live a peaceful, less violent, and a more grounded life. What is the role of the Center for Indic Studies in this? Well, there's a partnership between the university and the 3R Foundation. Through an MOU, they help us to train the teachers, they organize, we can use the labs, we can use the facilities, so kids from my school can come on campus and use the library and all those things. There's a lot of facilities that is accessible to them. And the 3R Foundation is the foundation that signs this MOU with the university that allows me to do what I do. Thank you very much. Dr. Singh has been working very closely with me on this, and actually each day he speaks to me about 2 hours and says, Panditji, we got to take this to the next level, which is globalization. Yes. He said, we need to go to Africa, we need to go to India, we need to go to South America, we need to go all over the place. Let's take it to the next level. Thank you very much.